Hello and welcome to the Russian Empire History Podcast, the history of all the peoples of the Russian Empire. I'm your host, JP Bristow. This is Season 1, The Forest, the Steppe and the Birth of the Russian Empire, and Episode 81, Goodbye to the 13th Century. Apologies for my voice during this episode. I'm recovering from a cold and a little bit hoarse. So we finished last time in 1293, with Toqtoa about to send Andrei with troops to remove Dmitri. They raided Rus cities while Dmitri fled west to Pskov. The campaign was particularly harsh. Toqtoa was going to replace Toqtoa's handoff approach with more interference in the northeast, regularly sending his emissaries to tell the knyazes how things stood, and there would be no place for Nogay to make policy. For now, Nogay bides his time. He does not challenge Toqtoa's moves in the northeast, and it took a few more years for the standoff with Nogay to come to a head, with the trigger being a family dispute. Nogay had married his daughter to the son of a knyaz leader named Salgi-Uday, one of Toqtoa's inner circle. Salgi-Uday was a Karachu, not a member of the Golden Family. He was a descendant of Borte's uncle and was married to Toqtoa's grandmother, Kelnishaka. Kelnishaka was the granddaughter of Tolui and had close ties to prominent Toluids from China to Azerbaijan. So it was the usual kind of political marriage between children of important families. Unfortunately, the kids hated each other. Nogay's daughter was Muslim, Salgi-Uday's son was Buddhist. Apparently, they started fighting over religion and were fighting over everything else within days of the wedding. When his daughter complained, Nogay saw the opportunity to get rid of a rival. Counting on his position as a Jochid, a member of the Golden Family, and not merely the Horde's chief commander, he asked Toqtoa to ship Salgi-Uday back to Khwarezm, or give him to Nogay. Toqtoa, who had no reason to quarrel with the Kongirad or the Toluids, said no. This put Nogay in a bad position. After nearly reaching the top, he was being pushed back to where he had been under Möngke Timur, just the commander with his own horde, not the power behind the throne. And now he was getting on in years and could not afford to wait for the situation to change under a new Khan. So he went all in. He declared himself Khan and had coins minted with his tamga. His eldest son, Cheke, was designated as his heir. As there could not be two Khans, the only question was whether the conflict would be resolved by a Kurultai or by war. Although he was a Batuid and had been recognized as Khan, Toqtoa had made enemies with his purges. Some of the begs went over to Nogay. It would be war. The first battle took place on the Don in late 1297 or early 1298. Nogay won the day, but it was not a decisive encounter. Toqtoa withdrew to the Volga, while Nogay set his sights on Crimea. His particular target was the Genoese colony at Kaffa. Initially, he was demanding that they pay taxes to him instead of Toqtoa, but when the Genoese killed the grandson he sent to handle the business, Nogay called in his supporters for a punitive mission. The Genoese were rich pickings, so they all came. They robbed, captured and killed Muslim, Italian and Frankish merchants all across Crimea and returned home loaded with spoils. However, Nogay had other ideas. He'd made his point, and he had put a lot of work into cultivating his relationships with the Italians. Now they knew who was in charge, he wanted them to get back to work. So he took his allies by surprise and released their prisoners. It was a terrible miscalculation. His allies saw it as a humiliating deprivation of their rightful dues and a violation of the laws that they'd been given by Chinggis Khan. The begs immediately departed to join Toqtoa. The loss of the begs left Nogay without sufficient men to defend his lands. Toqtoa was soon pressing him. The final battle came at the Kogalnik River in modern Moldova, deep in Nogay's home territory. This time, Toqtoa smashed Nogay's army. The old commander tried to flee, but was caught and wounded by a Rus warrior fighting for Toqtoa, and died of his wounds. His sons tried to fight on, but his horde disintegrated, fleeing into the Balkans, Poland, and Lithuania. Toqtoa gave Isakeia, Nogay's capital, to one of his own sons. The 3-year civil war in the horde cost thousands of soldiers' lives, and saw thousands more shipped off to slavery in the Mediterranean. The outcome was unexpected for the horde's western neighbours, and had a significant long-term impact. Nogay had run the western border for 3 decades. He had defeated the Byzantines and Ilkhans and managed to dodge the blame for a couple of unsuccessful Hungarian and Polish campaigns. He had a reputation everywhere as one of the greatest military commanders around. As he fought with Toqtoa, Marco Polo was in a Genoese jail, dictating his travels to Rustichello da Pisa. The book ends just after Nogay beat Toqtoa in their first battle, with Polo describing Nogay as the greatest Tartar in Europe. The Italian was sure the old commander would win the civil war. Once he was gone, Jochid control over the Black Sea coast remained solid, but their influence in Hungary and the Balkans began to slip away. Over the 14th century, nomads would be pushed out of the Dniester and Danube valleys. While Nogay may have been one of the great Mongol commanders, Marco Polo was overlooking the serious disadvantages that he faced. His domain in the west was too far away from any potential allies. He could not reach the Chagataids or the Ogadaids without crossing the whole of Jochid and Ilkhan territory. Toqtoa, as Saldiul Dai demonstrated, had close connections he could draw on across the Mongol world. As we've covered in members' episodes, the Konyurads had been highly influential and wealthy since the earliest days of Chinggis Khan's rise. Now they dominated Khwarezm, one of the most prosperous regions controlled by the horde. But despite this, for Toqtoa, taking the side of the Konyurad begs against Nogay raised other questions. It was the first time since Chinggis Khan had appeared that a Karachu had been allowed to defy a member of the Golden Family, and the highest-ranking commander of the horde at that. This was probably one reason why many of the horde's leaders had supported Nogay to begin with, and only switched sides when he made his disastrous misjudgment about distributing their spoils. The social and political hierarchy, with the Golden Family chosen by Tengri at the top, was the linchpin of Mongol society. Nogay and his supporters saw the war as being between a Jochid, Nogay, and the knyaz, between the Golden Family and the Karachu. Actually, both Toqtoa taking the side of the knyaz and Nogay trying to seize power, first through a council controlling a weak Khan, then directly, showed the growing power of the aristocracy. Toqtoa winning restored the status quo for the time being, but before too long, the Begs will be trying to control the succession again. At the same time as the Jochid Civil War was being fought in the west, important events were unfolding in the east. Konichi had died in 1298. His great wealth and indulgence had led him to an unusual achievement for a medieval nomad: obesity. Rashid al-Din wrote that he grew fatter every day. He was unable to ride a horse and had to travel by cart. According to the Mongol records, he was suffocated to death by the weight of the fat around his neck. As we've heard, the Ordaids had been the most peaceful of all the Mongols, living quietly for 5 decades. So when a succession struggle broke out, it was a shock for everyone. Kaidu and the Chagataids, the Ordaids' neighbors to the south, supported Konichi's cousin, while Toqtoa and Kubilai supported Konichi's son, Bayan. The fighting dragged on until a truce was agreed in 1304, but continued sporadically until Konichi's grandson, Sashi-Buk, took over the horde in 1312. But in the wider Mongol world, the 1304 truce was more important. Kaidu was also dead by 1304, and the truce set out that Toqtoa and the Toluids were in an alliance that made them far stronger than any of the other Mongol realms. They would make the decisions, and the rest of the Golden Family could either submit or rebel. One Ilkhanid wrote that, after 45 years of fighting, the descendants of Genghis Khan were finally reunited from China to the Mediterranean. Toqtoa was now in a very strong position. With Konichi and Nogay gone, his dominance in the Great Horde was unchallenged. The political agreement with the Toluids enabled further trade expansion, and he was the main beneficiary. His ambition went further than simply developing what he already had. He wanted to recover control of the southern routes, lost to the Ilkhanids way back in Berke's time. He insisted that Azerbaijan was part of the lands granted to the Ulus of Jochi. Hulagu had taken it without the right to do so, and the Ilkhanids would have to return it. For now, the Ilkhanids agreed to reopen the Caucasian Road through Derbent. To put more pressure on, he wrote to the Mamluks asking them to attack the Ilkhanids. The Ilkhanids made a counteroffer, returning prisoners and offering the Mamluks trading rights in Baghdad, and a truce was concluded between them. Toqtoa had a different vision of the way the Eurasian trade networks should be organized than the Great Horde had had so far. His focus was further south, centered on the Ulughkul, the Great Center, a corridor from the Caucasus to Khwarezm that was his personal domain directly controlled by his keshig. This was to be the node through which all east-west trade ran. The immediate effect of this was that Toqtoa did not see the Genoese as essential trade partners. So when the Mamluks allied with the Ilkhanids, Toqtoa went after the Mamluks' middlemen, the Genoese merchants. They were rounded up, their goods were seized, and they were expelled from Horde territory. To avoid diplomatic problems with the West, the Khan announced that his move against the Genoese was due to them selling children to the Mamluks. Of course, they were selling children to the Mamluks, and to Italy. 10 to 15% of the population of Italian cities at this time was slaves coming out of the Black Sea. Young girls, in particular, were acquired as domestic workers. Officially, however, the Pope had banned selling children as slaves, and there was a double ban because the Pope had also banned trading with the Muslims. The issue was, what could you do on the down low, and what could not bear the light of publicity? No Western ruler could come out and publicly defend selling children to the Muslims. In May 1308, the Genoese finally pulled out of Kaffa. After months of siege, they had run out of supplies and were unable to continue their defense. Soon, Italians were gone from the whole of the northern Black Sea coast. The Franciscans found themselves in a difficult position. Mongols stopped converting to Christianity. Previously open doors were closing. They blamed the Genoese, sending back reports accusing them of illegal trade, spying on the Mongols, and pretending to be loyal to the Mamluks, Ilkhanids, and Jochids all at the same time. Toqtoa's next move was to tackle money. As we've previously noted, different kinds of coins were being minted across Mongol territory. They did not only have different designs, they had different weights and purities, and this was causing increasing complaints from merchants who found that they received coins with less silver in them than they were expecting. Toqtoa's answer was not to create a single coin for his empire. The diversity of coinage had been a response to the diversity of populations, and nothing had changed there. People put more trust in local coins. Instead, he imposed standardized monetary and weight systems, while allowing the designs to continue to vary. Foreign coins were also banned everywhere except in border settlements, so only the new coins could be used throughout the Horde's territory. One interesting element was that Toqtoa removed his tamga from the coins. We've seen the tamga used by steppe rulers to declare what's theirs for centuries. So what changed? The usual interpretation given is that the Mongols were no longer seen as conquerors from outside. Their domain was now seen by everyone as the Jochid homeland, and therefore they had no reason to declare a claim to what everyone already knew was theirs. The tamga was only kept for borderlands, Bulgar, Crimea, and the lower Danube. This monetary reform was a massive project that took almost 30 years to complete. It was rolled out region by region, starting in Khwarezm, followed by Crimea, and then gradually up the Volga. The old coins were recalled, converted into jewelry, or melted down and reminted as new coins. Once again, the Mongols were demonstrating sophisticated state capacity. Toqtoa had begun his reign by overturning the stability that Dmitri had established in Rus with Nogay's assistance, and the northeast remained unstable throughout his reign. It had begun with Andrei's fourth trip to Sarai to get an army from the Khan. This time he was accompanied by the knyazes and the bishop of Rostov, who had clearly fallen out with Dmitri for reasons that are not explained. Andrei presented his usual complaints and allegations about Dmitri withholding tribute and so on. At first, Toqtoa wanted to summon Dmitri to explain himself, but after discussions with his advisors, he decided to send an army commanded by a leader named Duden. Duden's not a Mongol name. It could be a Slavicized rendering of Tudan. The Novgorod Chronicle says he was Toqtoa's brother, but it's not clear. This was a serious invasion. Even the pro-Andrei Novgorod Chronicle describes it in disastrous terms. The army attacked Suzdal, Vladimir, Murom, Moscow, Kolomna, Uglich, and a dozen other towns. Andrei's hometown of Gorodets and the Rostov knyaz's towns were left alone. Dmitri, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, fled to Pskov. After rampaging across Suzdalia, the campaign was moving towards Tver. It was flooded with refugees, and the knyaz, Mikhail, was away trying to find help in the horde, presumably from Nogay. He returned before the city was attacked, and Duden decided to take Volokolamsky and prepare for an invasion of Novgorod instead. Volokolamsky fell easily. The boyars of Novgorod did not wait to be attacked. They sent bribes to pay off Duden and invited Andrei to become knyaz. Andrei ascended the throne of Novgorod for the second time and sent the Mongols back home. Obviously, with Dmitri still in Pskov, there was still potential for further conflict, but with the Mongol army sent home, the Rus knyazes were mostly too weak to even fight among themselves. Dmitri allied himself with Mikhail of Tver and tried to return to Pereyaslav. Andrei made an attempt to capture him, but only caught some of his baggage train, and then they reached an agreement. Dmitri formally handed the Grand Knyazhestvo back to Andrei and was given Pereyaslav back in return. He set off to reclaim the town, but died en route. His son Ivan took his place. After another trip to Sarai, Andrei managed to secure some Mongol support again, and marched on Tver, which was forced to acknowledge him as the Grand Knyaz. With Nogay unable to provide support to any would-be rivals, Andrei was finally secure as Grand Knyaz, which he would remain for the next 10 years. Secure or not, he remained weak. Gorodets was still remote and underpopulated, meaning that he had no independent power base of his own. Even nominal control over Novgorod and Vladimir counted for little without his own men to draw on. The Rostov knyazes were also weak. The repeated invasions by Mongol armies supporting him had done him no favours, and it appears, as far as we can judge from the chronicles, that there was widespread resentment against him. As there was nothing to unite them, the other knyazes focused on developing their own local resources, with Tver and Moscow in particular emerging towards the end of the century as new centres of power. Andrei knew that he needed a new base if he was ever going to get strong enough to impose himself on the other knyazes. And it had to be somewhere that would be accepted as part of his patrimony, his by right, not somewhere contested like Vladimir. There was only one real choice, Pereyaslavl, held by his nephew Ivan. So he went to Toqtoa again. This time the Khan refused to give him an army, but he did send his emissary the following year to call a congress of the knyazes in Vladimir. All the knyazes came, and the chronicles describe it as if it was a battle, with Grand Knyaz Andrei, his allies, Fyodor Rostislavich of Yaroslavl and Konstantin of Rostov on one side, and Mikhail of Tver, Daniil of Moscow, and all the men of Pereyaslavl on the other. The bishops of Vladimir and Sarai had to intervene to stop it coming to a fight. The Congress ruled that Pereyaslavl was the patrimony of Ivan Dmitrievich. Andrei could not accept this. While Ivan was on his way to Sarai to collect his Yarlik, Andrei set out to attack Pereyaslavl, planning to move on to Moscow and Tver afterwards. Daniil and Mikhail blocked his way, and without a Mongol army at his back, Andrei withdrew and was forced to acquiesce to the decision of the Congress. Shortly after, Andrei was further weakened when Mikhail entered into a mutual assistance agreement with Novgorod that was clearly aimed against Andrei bringing any more Mongols up to attack the Rus. Andrei kept trying. He attacked Pereyaslavl again in 1298, but was defeated by Daniil and Mikhail. In 1300, he summoned a new congress. The chronicle says that there was great confusion and Ivan and Mikhail disagreed over something, but with Daniil of Moscow's support, Ivan kept Pereyaslavl. It was a sign of Moscow's rising influence. In May 1302, Ivan Dmitrievich died without children. Andrei quickly sent his men into Pereyaslavl and ran off to the horde to put in his claim to the vacant knyazhestva. But he was too late. As soon as Andrei headed south, Daniil of Moscow moved in and removed Andrei's men. The chronicler noted, maybe accurately, maybe as a justification for Daniil's move, that Ivan had given Daniil his blessing to rule in the Pereyaslavl, due to their close affection for one another. The people of Pereyaslavl appeared to be content in any case. When Daniil died a year later, they immediately acclaimed his son Yuri as knyaz, and did not let him go to his father's funeral in Moscow, in case Andrei took advantage of his absence. Later in the year, Andrei received a new emissary from the Khan and called a new congress. The emissaries read out the Yarliks of the knyazes, and Yuri was recognized as the knyaz of Pereyaslavl, which from now on would remain under Moscow's control. Andrei died on 27th of July 1304, bringing an era to a close, although no one would have realized it at the time. The old system of succession that resulted in any strong knyazhestva that appeared being broken up and divided among sons and brothers until no strength or significance remained, was ending. Now a new rivalry would begin between the knyazes of Tver and Moscow. Instead of petty, squabbling knyazlets without a patrimony, these new powers would set out to build lasting dynasties from a hereditary base of their own, without relying on the prestige of Vladimir or the money of Novgorod. Join me next episode as the Northeast reaches a turning point. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.